I am so delighted that you gentlemen could come over to Wayne Manor and spend a little time with me. This is a very nice occasion.
The honor is ours, I think.
Truly.
Thanks so much for having us.
And I'm sorry for lifting the Shakespeare bust, Ted, before. That's my bad. I should have
knows
left
your
it below.
secret.
Couldn't keep your hands off it.
Well,
got
just don't ask me to go to the basement.
Almost 50 years now we're talking about this show, right?
Batman's back and Blu-ray's got him.
How's it feel after all this time? I imagine you get a lot of people asking over the years, hey man, I want to see these episodes, and now they can watch them.
Kevin, I haven't seen my picture painted on the side of a studio wall for years. This is so touching.
You're gonna break my heart. That's adorable. That is adorable.
It is fun.
Well, there have been a lot of actors in a lot of costumes played a lot of superheroes over the years, and those shows have come and gone, and they don't have the connection with the audience that this show seems to still have after all of these years. People still respond to it today the way they responded to it in 1966, 67, 68.
I think it's because we decided early on to play it with humor and to make the kids, as you were growing up, believe it. And then as you got older, you saw the absurdities.
Don't ruin it for me.
What absurdity. Jim hasn't grown up yet.
Well, that's good. Because, in a sense, what we did was an homage to DC Comics and Batman. And to do that with a little humor and reflecting the late 60s in our society, some of the absurdities. And we, I hate the term camp. So many writers use the word camp as convenience.
It does sell the show short to call it camp, because it was more than that.
I didn't see any of that. When I watched that show, all I saw was Batman. You were, and will always be, my first Batman. Every fat boy remembers his first Batman. You were and will always remain my first Batman. When I watched that show as 5 years old, 6 years old, all the way up till heavens, I guess by the time I was 12, that was Batman. They were treating it seriously. And this is the way a Batman adventure went. There was a cliffhanger, just like in the comics. Here's every one of the main villains in his pantheon represented. There's him and Robin with a very special relationship, Commissioner Gordon as well. All the earmarks were there. So much so that later when I went into the comics and would read like the source material or other people's interpretation of it, you would feel like, oh, they're ruining it. Where's Aunt Harriet? You know, because your Batman was the first Batman through the first door, and that was the one that attracted me to comics in general, you know, and bringing me into the world of the Super Friends. Pre-Super Friends, it was Batman, me sitting in front of a black and white TV going like this because everything was shot on a Dutch tilt. So the whole time I'm cocked head like a Cocker Spaniel looking at the TV.
It hasn't aged. You guys created a world within that is ageless. You know, Gotham City is Gotham City. It doesn't matter what year you're watching.
It really works.
You know?
It doesn't go like, it's a 60s show. It's its own era.
If it wasn't for dial phones, you wouldn't know that it was Batman never had a cell phone.
Back in the day, you're shooting the show. Which character did you prefer to play, Bruce or Batman? My guess had to be Bruce, because it's like, look at me, it's Adam West, as opposed to Batman is like, hey, it's Batman.
Of course. When I was doing Batman, I didn't try, but I used those moments, for example, with Catwoman, telling her, you give me curious stirrings in my use those moments to be kind of fun in your costume. But you're right, to do Bruce Wayne was a great relief because I could, not have to wear the funny, itchy tights, and I could be more myself. So you're right.
The difference between the two characters, a lot of people don't recognize. But Bruce Wayne is very different than your performance in Batman. And there's that great scene in the series where you're talking as Bruce Wayne talking to Batman on the bat phone, going back and forth, switching the phone from hand to hand. And in that moment, that's when you recognize how clearly distinct these two characters are in that performance, how great that is.
Well, wasn't he clever?
He was. Whoever played that guy was very clever.
Now, were these choices did you do your history for these choices, or were they born of the moment? Do you know what I mean?
That's a very good question, Phil. They were really born at the moment. Right. And I'm an actor who believes in playing those moments. But you're right, it
true.
was a
I've-
little world all its own,
Absolutely.
spitting out there in time and space. And that's the wonder of Batman.
Yes.
It can be rendered,
Yes.
presented in any way, on different levels, universes, whatever, parallel.
I actually thought the show was more serious than the comic books themselves of that era, because Batman was
Yes.
going to the moon, alternate dimensions. He turned to Zebra Batman.
Yeah, the
So
show
it-
kind of got a bad rap for
Right.
not taking the character seriously. But if
Right.
you look at the comics,
comic
era,
books,
And,
they
and
really
you guys
did take it
transfer
seriously.
the color palettes, the bright, intense, primary colors. I thought it really captured what Batman the comic book should be. Actually, it was more serious than the comic book in many ways. So,
It's interesting, Jim, because we were really trying to magnify what we saw in the comic books of that particular era and bring it to life.
were any of the other actors into the characters as kids themselves? Like, was that, or was it a role
Yeah,
that they
did
just
Gorshin know of the Riddler before he played him? Did he have any idea?
I think he did.
Yeah.
Frank's an actor who really does his homework. And Frank will be rehearsing in his trailer hour after hour before he's, due to go on set or whatever. Frank had this intensity. And I think that Frank did know about the Riddler character. But he really thought he would bring him to life in a way that was almost super realistic. And he did.
He put that character on the map for a lot of us.
he's
I-
a-
And
he's
he
the
made the Riddler terrifying.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
because his performance is so out there and so fringe and so edgy that you're like, this guy might pull a question mark shaped knife every minute and stab one of us in the eye. It was there, you couldn't tell what was there.
Well,
I
he
mean,
was-
with Cesar Romero's the Joker, it's just like, it's all laughs and
It's
you're
all
like, this
clown.
guy, yeah, forget it, he's terrifying. But
He's
the
creepy
Riddler,
looking
even more
too,
so.
yeah.
And he is creepy.
because of the beard or the mustache.
Mustache.
I don't understand what it was. It just
Strange.
looked like, what's with his mouth? It's frightening, as a
But
kid.
the actors you got to play these villains, I mean, they had big careers prior to that. I mean, Otto Preminger was a well-established director, and kids today wouldn't even know that. They see him as Mr. Freeze. That's it. How did you call or get all of these wonderful actors to come play with you guys?
Interestingly, our executive producer, Bill Dozier, had worked with and knew a lot of these people. And there wasn't an actor in town who didn't want to do the show, because we all want to do shows that are hot, and especially shows that we can watch with our children, our grandchildren.
Right.
And so, Burgess Meredith called us. Frank Sinatra wanted to do the show. It just went on and on. I was the luckiest guy in the world.
Best.
Because Cesar Romero was a Latin lover type his
Yes.
whole
Yeah.
career. To have the forethought that Dozier had to think that he could even play the Joker was insane.
Well, Caesar made one extremely profound request, that if he played Joker, he would not shave his mustache, because he felt his entire career as a Latin lover was based on that mustache. He was right and wrong.
Phil mentioned Otto Preminger. Tell the Preminger story. Because he was difficult to work with.
Well, yes, but I don't want to be disparaging. Who might be sitting at this table as a spirit? But yes, he was difficult. In one scene, my Batman had to run in and pick him up off the floor. Just pick him up. And eight takes later, because he kept gripping the floor and getting heavier by the moment, he didn't want me to pick him up. He wanted me to really work at it. I'm going to get this guy.
Directors.
Well, the ninth take, I ran in and kicked him in the ribs. We became like a ballet duo. We had wonderful people. My God, everyone from Shelley Winters to...
Yeah.
Who's your favorite guest star? Would it be repeaters or one-time onlys? Who is the one that got you geeked? We're geeked to be sitting here at a table with you. Of the guest stars that came through to play villains, who did you geek out about?
Well, if you've ever seen some of my early pictures, which they're showing somewhere, I'm a real dweeb. I am not Mr. Cool. And when these people were presented to me, or I came in not knowing with whom I'd be working, and I got in front of the camera, and there was Cesar Romero with the laugh and whatever. I used it, but it was kind of nervous-making. I think among my favorites would be Burgess Meredith as Peggy Baby, right? Well, you do a lot of those.
I do a few of the voices.
Have you got a little Caesar up your sleeve, or?
Yeah. I'll make the jokes around here, Wayne.
The comedy aspect, as this is now, we lead into the comedy aspect, where for you, coming from I will say, quote unquote, legit theater dramatic background, where did you find you were funny with this?
Well-
or how did you find that?
I don't know, really. I've always thought funny and, been the class clown.
Right.
But I wanted to contract across the street over here from Wayne Manor at Warner Brothers and really worked a lot and learned my craft there. But I never got a chance to be funny. I was always playing very serious, dramatic roles as killers or sidekicks or whatever. But, I knew all along that if I had a chance to play romantic comedy or funny things, all I wanted to do is be Peter Sellers.
It's weird. It's true. Like in the latter half of your career, it's a lot of the body of work is comedic. And then when I think about it now, so was the top half. Batman, to a lot of people, was comedic, and you guys were working arch or satirically. So yeah, you're a natural at comedy. You've been doing it for eons, and then winding up on Family Guy, for heaven's sakes. How does that happen?
Well, Seth MacFarlane is a friend of mine, and he called me, said, "Do you want to do this?" I said, "What do I do?" He says, "You do Adam West," in a strange way.
Stranger.
Yeah, yes.
The show, when people talk about it now, and us even as adults, we talk about it as having levels. When I was a kid, it had no levels other than like, this is the best thing that ever happened. But as you get older, you can definitely see, there's the archness is there, the satire is there. There's a lot of innuendo there as well. Was that conscious? Did you know what you were doing, putting it in there? I can't imagine it just happened accidentally. But were you fully aware that, like, okay, we're making something for kids, but let's throw in something for the adults as well, and maybe they'll pick that up, keep them tuned in?
It was all carefully worked out and contrived from before the first day. Bill Dozier, executive producer, and the others, we all talked and agreed that Lorenzo Semple Jr.'s brilliant script, that is the first 2 episodes, I Diddle Riddle, I think, gave us a certain direction. And I understood it and fell down laughing. But we did decide to shape it in that way and give it that tone. It was not an accident.
Well, were there takes or early takes that were more comedic or more knowing, wink, wink? Or did you guys know from the start that, hey, we're going to play this completely straight?
Yeah, that tone is hard to find.
Right.
That line is hard to walk.
Yeah, we knew from the start that we had to do that. But as Batman, I always had to have kind of a knowing, what would you say, a little sparkle or something, because otherwise the character becomes too dull.
Yeah.
It becomes Lone Ranger-ish. And I was told to play it that way, and I got memos from everywhere. What's this kid doing? What? That's wrong. We don't want. But I had to. And I don't mean to sound dramatic, but I wanted to do it my way. And I just had a feeling about it. And a week later, the memos changed. And they said, let this kid do what he wants. Let him do what he wants. It's working. And I think what worked, and you gentlemen have put it beautifully, what worked was that relationship and the characters in their bizarre costumes becoming believable.
Well, that's what you say, how you had the twinkle, the look in your eye. That's what, for me, separated you from the Lone Rangers of the world. It brought me into Bruce Wayne more than this austere type of carriage that would be off-putting to a child, that's for sure. And I think that humor brought in a whole audience of non-comic book people that helps to sustain a show. Your show did exceptionally well. Not just comic book fans were into it, but fans of good TV.
We had so much help, really talented people with us, and it made my job easy. That is, if you work 15 hours a day and run around in that costume, some people thought it was easy.
Speaking of the costume,
Never let them see you sweat.
Back before the days of cosplay got big, I found the seamstress that had the designs from the original show, and I got a costume made. I mean, it measured my body and everything, custom made. And I just realized the costume is super uncomfortable and extremely hot. So like, was that like? I think it had tights and then a onesie and then the blue trunks over it. Like it took forever to go to the bathroom. And I know you addressed in the comic
It's
books,
a
right?
valid question, but I first think we have to address the fact you made a Batman.
Yeah, of course.
For yourself?
Yeah, for Halloween. Yeah.
Was this like when you got crazy rich? You're like, you know what? I need one of every costume.
Yeah, it was expensive. It was like like $4,000 or something like that. Yeah, and they hand dyed it to make it look just like the original TV show. And they had, I mean, it's the utility belt. I had to come up to LA. They
How did
measured
you
my
not
foot.
wear that today?
I
can't bring costume.
It's extremely hot. I've worn it at Mardi Gras. I've worn it all around the world, actually. But yeah, my days as Batman are retired. I'm sorry to say, but
Somebody who understands.
exactly.
Well, in that era, there wasn't. The fabric choices, I guess, were limited. What they could use to get those colors to pop and all that kind of stuff.
They
So
must have been, Ralph.
They had to do what you had to do.
They must have been limited. And you're right, we wore our underwear outside our pants. Yeah. We pulled on those tights to put on the world, really.
We talked about the influence of the character of Batman, what Batman's meant to us, what your Batman's meant to us. But Batman, for you, seems to have been a bridge to some of the best things that happened in your life. So, of everything that Batman afforded you or introduced you to, what was the greatest aspect of your life that the Dark Knight made possible?
When I travel, or when I do Comic-Cons, or signings, autograph parties, whatever, when people come up to me and play entire scenes, you know, from the series, and I say, "Got a life, get out of here." No, no, you don't. No. But when they do that, and when I see how happy these memories are for them, then I have to be happy. Otherwise, I think I'd be a flaming ingrate, you know. Nothing makes me feel better than to make other people happy, to give them the laughs. Now, you guys are great at that, and it makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Truly.
Really. You know, an actor, I think, wants to be loved, wants to impress an audience or an artist with whatever he does. For me, that kind of reward with audience response, you guys know that, it's remarkable.
It's one of the greatest drugs around because it means you mattered, you resonated. The decisions you made, the choices you made.
Yeah. You don't need that hard stuff.
I think more so than laughs for me, at least, is that, I mean, you made the Batman world real, and certainly when I was a kid, there was there was no Star Wars. There were no these big budget tentpole movies during the summer. That show was, you know, the comic book come to life, and the Batmobile, all the sets, the way the Batcave looked, it made it real and made it believable, and it inspired me to want to work in comics and bring that world to life on paper. Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, I always find it, you know, I love when I meet fans and they've become graphic designers or artists themselves because of something they read as a kid. And so, to me, that world sparked the imagination of a generations of people that wanted to go into the arts. And so, you know, that's my big thank you to you. I mean, I'll tell you that
you're
I took it very seriously, and I still think about the Batmobile, my love for automobiles, especially those that shoot off mortars in the back. Those are things that have stuck with me all these years afterwards.
So, Jimmy, you're saying then that you still take it seriously?
I still do. I have my costume. I have
Flame comes out the back of his
I'm
car
digging
now.
my cave, and pretty soon I'll be all set. So.
You know, when I was a kid, sports were very big. Now, comics, entertainment, geek culture is very mainstream. Back then, not so much. Sports what bound kids together. So those of us that didn't play sports got lost in other things. I got lost in Batman. I created friendships off of Batman. When I didn't have people to play with, there was Batman in the world of Batman. But that was also something you could take to school and use as currency amongst other people. Start talking about it like, I watch Batman, and suddenly you got a friend. And then other people like, I watch Batman, and then you got 3 people, you're playing Batman on the playground. So it was, for me, it was glue to meeting other people. It was the currency of my youth to be like, I love Batman. I love Batman too. Friendships are born.
Well, Batman's become a real social force.
Big time.
And you guys know that as well as I do.
I have a unique background in that my father was in Mission Impossible, Greg Morris, and I was very lucky to visit many sets over the years. And there were 2 that stuck with me. One was your set, which we visited when I was about 8 or 9.
You went to the Batcave at age 8?
I remember you well.
It was crazy fun.
You had more hair.
I did. It was probably like this. But it made quite an impression. Just seeing the main set, which was the cave, and how opulent and how detailed it all was. What was it like to go to work there, to have that kind of setting, to then ply your trade, and then the people who would come to visit you? It was really like a celebrity who's who.
No matter how accustomed one gets to the sets, to me, it was wondrous because of what they did. Our decorators, our designers like Serge Grisman, people like that, they did a remarkable job. I mean, people still talk about the atomic pile, and gee, don't slip and fall in that thing, like a go-go dancer did.
That'll leave a mark.
But, to be able to work with that context and those surroundings is a wonderful thing for an actor.
But people like Phil's dad must have been dropping by the set all the time to bring their kids by to meet Batman and that kind of stuff, right?
Well, yes, there were days we had Clint Eastwood, we had Steve McQueen, a number of others.
One of the things on the set that was like front and center was the Batmobile. And to have that, even the car I drive now is my Batmobile. Every boy who grew up in that era, their first car was a Batmobile. It was a part of that. What was it like did you ever actually drive it home? Huh? Take it off the set?
I tried to borrow it to cruise Van Nuys Boulevard. I tried to pick up some chicks, but it didn't work. I got so tired of driving that car, but it was funky. It was funky and fun, and people like it better than the new ones because it was not only kind of comedic, but it was interesting that these 2 idiots had to have everything labeled.
They were ahead of the curve. They weren't idiots. They were branding before there was branding.
Right.
The first car phone with a cord on it. Right?
Yeah.
But that was probably done as a joke, right? The idea of a phone in a car, it's ridiculous,
How
right?
quasi-futuristic.
Right.
Yeah, this could never happen.
Exactly.
Which means one day we may
will
need
happen.
bat
Yes.
shark repellents as
That's
well.
right.
You had an auto theft system before anybody had alarms on their cars?
absolutely.
It was fireworks coming out of the back of the pipes.
GPS.
GPS, yeah, the bat scope.
Okay, yeah.
When you ran around the back of the car and those fireworks came out the back, was tough on the shins. I had very smooth, shaven legs.
Everything was singed off.
Yes.
That didn't ride so good, that car, right?
It was difficult,
hard to
Ralph.
drive?
Filmically, it was wonderful. But to drive, it was difficult because of and if George Barris is out there somewhere, George, I'm not knocking the car, it was genius. But to drive the damn thing, the suspension, the accelerator was erratic. And what I tried to do in many shots was come quite fast toward camera and then spin it a bit into camera. The car was difficult, but I don't want to disappoint any kids or anyone. We went over 32 miles an hour.
Wow.
Oh, big number.
Well, let me hear it. Oh, no.
0 to 32 and
32. But when when we came out of that Batcave, I mean, we were blistering. I just love my wheels.
You had a lot of great toys too. You had the Bat Cycle and the Bat Copter and the Bat Boat. You had a lot of great toys.
You know what was really fun was that Bat Boat.
Was it really?
Oh, I love to drive that thing to get out in the open ocean and have a little something different.
Obviously, you were at San Diego Comic-Con. We were celebrating Batman's 75th anniversary. He's been around for a long, long time. And what's interesting about the Batman TV show was, for the longest time, the comic book industry was kind of, you know, every newspaper article would start with bam, whiff, pow. And it's amazing to me that we can finally embrace the show and see it for what it is. That it was a hugely influential show in the history of Batman, the development of the canon. And it's just amazing to be able to share this moment with you and kind of talk about that. And it's interesting to see how it all manifests differently with each person here, and just, you know.
The Bam Biff Pow made me smarter, because you would say that to people, Bam Biff Pow, or, you know, and try to describe words on the screen with exclamation points. And then a teacher one day was like, "That's onomatopoeia."
Right, that's right.
And I was like, what is that? And he showed me the word, onomatopoeia. It's taking a word, bringing it to life, you know, making it an active verb of some sort. And so right away, I was suddenly like, I was a smarter kid because I watched Batman. Years later in comic books, a villain I would create for Green Arrow, who has also fought Batman,
that's right.
is named Onomatopoeia. And it came right from like, what are those words on the screen? Well, they're onomatopoetics, if you will.
What's interesting to me on the show, Batman, he was a hero because he was an altruistic, noble character, but, you know, in the comics, he was born of tragedy. I don't think they really reference the origin of Batman in the show much that I remember.
They did twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, Ralph.
I don't remember
Yes.
He said knowingly.
I did in the pilot episode. Lorenzo Semple Jr. set it up by having him talk about the death of his parents, since the death of his parents.
In the pilot?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then there was another episode where the Joker is trying to blackmail you. You're setting up the Joker into a blackmail scheme to try to uncover him as a counterfeiter. He's been counterfeiting money using a comic book printing press to make counterfeit money.
Yes.
And he asked you to murder someone.
Yes.
And you said, since the death of my parents, I abhor violence, you said.
You know something, Rob? You just hit on something that I figured was key when I was kind of putting this thing together. Batman, mine, was not an avenger.
Right.
He was not a vigilante, but he was someone that was so righteous with his feelings that because he saw his parents murdered, who was that, Joe Chill?
Right.
Yeah. It affected him so traumatically that he did what he did with his crime-fighting abilities, his physique, whatever, my physique, but in order not to avenge and murder those who did wrong, but to let them know that they were wrong and villains. And he would allow no one to do what Joe Chill did to his parents.
You probably have talked about this before. I have not heard, but had you met Burt Ward prior, is my one question. And the other is, as many shows that we have all done and as many things that we put together, chemistry cannot be bought. I mean, you know, I've worked on a lot of big budget things where they were just did not connect. So this chemistry that you had between you and the Alfred character and Harriet and Commissioner Gordon and Burt Ward, where did that all come from? Because that's hard to plan. That comes from the moments, right?
Our late executive producer, Bill Dozier, was immensely talented at picking talent and stirring up the mix. Now, when I signed on to do it, I had read Lorenzo Semple Jr.'s first scripts. And I said, yep, this is what I'm going to do. And so they signed me. I was going back to Europe. I had more films. Now, what happened was, and it was a concession on my part, they said, but it wasn't really. They said, would you test with a young actor that we think may be Rob? And I said, of course. You want the chemistry right, like you said. I tested with Burt Ward in some funny put together costumes that weren't quite right, but I could tell within 20 seconds that he was right for that role. He was naive, energetic, and terribly enthusiastic. And it just worked. And I could play off that, you know.
I've always wanted to know this. You're on set, the bookcase opens.
Yeah.
The bat poles are there.
We had 2 poles.
How far was a drop? For you guys, like in my mind, of course, we watch the show, it's edited, they always cut to the credits, and then we saw them land in the Batcave. So in my, long before I ever made films, I was just like, must be this gigantic set where they literally are going down, they stop, put on their clothes, then take the pole the rest of the way down.
They don't stop. When I was a kid, I would actually
Believe that they
No, I would
And they-
draw a cutaway, and the costume would be waiting there, and you would
For them to
literally
go through it.
Yeah, that's how it had to happen.
Unless they hit
There's
that
no
switch.
stopping on the pole to change costumes.
No, you gotta play crime, go fast.
Right, so yeah.
So
absolutely.
how far was the actual drop?
Have you ever climbed El Capitan? And it was no more than 15 feet.
That's
still pretty
high,
substantial.
though.
Well, yeah, but we had poles. I had a bigger pole than Robbins, but I had a pole. And, one time I slid down the pole and I landed on something kind of soft. And it was a wino. It was a guy sleeping off the floor because we landed on mattresses. And somehow they knew that it would be a warm place to
Sure.
go to bed, yeah.
Even
bat
that
poles.
was an addition. That's not in the comics. Prior to that, it's always him walking into
right,
the
that's
clock.
right, yeah.
So that was a nice addition to the Batman universe from the TV show that just added an element that instantly a kid was engaged. Because if you're watching a show and he goes to the grandfather clock and steps behind it, yeah, there's intrigue. But if the library opens up and there are 2 fireman poles, the thing that every child dreams of having from their room to a kitchen,
Yes.
like it just immediately invites you in.
And
Smart
the-
addition.
The urgency, the imminence
Right.
of screaming to the bat poles.
And a full-on sprint. I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
saunter.
They hit it.
They sprinted.
Well, we hit the wall when they didn't open it.
Maybe you could address this rumor I always heard was that the reason they put that in the show was because at the time, famously, Hugh Hefner had a pole in his Chicago mansion.
I bet he did.
That went from his upper floor to the bottom floor. And I think it was Lorenzo or Dozier or someone had heard about that and thought it would be great to put it in Wayne Manor.
Lorenzo.
Lorenzo thought that?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So it was based
he
on
was
Hefner.
Really good.
They took it from Playboy.
Yeah, another millionaire playboy.
There you go. Look at my surroundings.
Kevin and I were lucky enough to be asked to write the Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet comic book miniseries.
Yes, Greenie.
Based, of course, on the classic crossover episode you did with
Right.
Van Williams and Bruce Lee.
We got to sequelize the first crossover in comics media history, essentially.
Yeah. And that, I know those particular episodes hold a special place in the hearts of a lot of Batman fans, but a lot of superhero fans too, because as Kevin mentioned, you got to see 2 superheroes team up for the first time in a medium other than comic books ever.
Wow.
And working with Bruce Lee and Van Williams must have been a kick for you.
It was. Bruce was quite introspective and quiet, but when he was aroused, look,
I don't know if I want to hear this story.
what happened was Bert was quite good to it with the black belt stuff and whatever. And we talked Bruce Lee into walking through the entire week or so, glowering at Bert, looking like he hated him, and just couldn't wait to get a piece of it. Well, let me tell you, Bert thought he was pretty good with the karate, but he got a little nervous because Bruce Lee looking at you like that all week, and he just couldn't wait to get a piece of you. When they got up, I thought Bert was going to dissolve. But he did. Everything was good, and finally he knew it was a big joke, but Bruce Lee loved that. He was quite a character. We used to meet occasionally, and he'd come out to my beach house, and we'd go surfing or something. He was a good guy.
I'm a martial arts guy. And to hear, just to hear that from the source, because I've heard the urban legend, all the time that they went to blows or Bruce really took him to task, but just to hear that actually existed in some form for real, my palms are sweating because I was a Bruce Lee fanatic. I in fact studied Wing Chun Kung Fu.
Yeah.
It just so to hear those stories made real is. Something that this martial arts fanboy.
Bruce Lee was in on the joke, and he was a good guy.
I'm more astounded that he surfed.
Yeah, me too.
It's hard to do, right?
Don't you think he could do it, though? If anybody could just pick it up,
what
it'd be
couldn't he
Bruce
do?
Lee.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. What couldn't he do? And he was slashing the waves.
You've had in your life 3 Catwomen that I know of: Julie Newmar, Eartha Kitt, Lee Merriweather.
27 lives. Tough.
Which, without, you don't have to put others down to raise one, but who was your favorite Catwoman?
It's very difficult, but I think I would have to say Julie, because I worked with her first and mostly. And they were all remarkable Catwomen, but I think Julie because of the familiarity. And she promised to date me when she got out of jail.
There was a sexiness to the vibe between
absolutely.
you and Julie Moore
yeah.
that wasn't there with Eartha Kitt or with Lee Merriweather. Like, you actually believed that she could court you over to the dark side. She always had you on the line, but virtue kept you from pairing up with her.
You saw that.
Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful.
You always
But
paused a little bit before you took her into jail. Like you were debating it.
He felt bad about that.
Well, I did. Julie and I worked that out carefully, that sexual tension. We felt that Batman and Catwoman would need that to make it more interesting. Which way is it going to go? And if she's put away in the joint and she says to Batman, if I get out early for good behavior, maybe we could date. It's that kind of relationship.
You guys are sharing a milkshake with 2 straws.
I grabbed a straw at the last minute.
Right. And how great in that time period in the 60s to have the colorblind casting of having Eartha Kitt step in as Catwoman,
Yes.
without a mention about it, just to have her
Yes.
play the role without making a big deal out of it. At that time, it was not a
Big.
common thing.
And she was very effective. She was
great.
really good.
She was the best purr of all.
Perfect.
Well, she sang, Cafe Society on the piano. She sang things, didn't she, with purrs in it?
You have played Adam West quite a lot in your career, and a lot of actors kind of eschew that. They don't like to go to that place because
I
they don't want
don't
the public to
care.
know. I wanted to know how you
I
felt
don't
about
care.
that. Wow. Wait, know me.
They pay me. I've always been very realistic about these things. And anything that gives me a chance to try to create, whereas others might not take a chance, I just look at it like a challenge. And even the mayor of Quahog in Family Guy, I mean, how quirky can you get? But somehow it works for me, You try to preserve your dignity regardless of the comedy, because the act of preserving your dignity is funny.
The fight to preserve your dignity.
Yes.
Sometimes is hilarious.
Well,
Yes.
look at Cary Grant. He'd fall on the table or a chair and he'd immediately up and, try to do it in a way that preserved his dignity. Yeah.
So you love to work.
I do. And I think most actors do, and I would love to see more actors working. I really would. And to that extent, I think Batman, in its own way, was good because we put a lot of people to work. As stunt guys, whatever.
Sure.
As hench people.
No, I loved
Right.
all the fight scenes too because they were elaborately choreographed.
Yes.
So I try to think of that even in the comics. Is like, how can I have these characters team up and use their powers together, kind of thing? Because you would have there'd always be the situation where somehow all the henchmen got in a big pile and ran towards you, and then you guys grab something, pick up a table, would run and hit them and knock them all out in one blow, right? Which is like, That's it. Gotta capture that.
As I got
That's
older,
the most effective way.
As I got older, I was able to recognize the difference between Hubie Kearns and you in a fight scene. I always know they cut to you for the close-up and the line, and then when they went back, it was Hubie. But the action was all the same. The way that was intercut was almost seamless. It looked like you guys had to stage the fight twice almost to get the close-up stuff and then get the big stuff.
We did. And what else happened, Ralph, is that I would get together with Hubie Kearns, my stunt guy, and he was the head stunt gaffer. And Hubie and I would work out the fights. And, you know, we'd decide where the close-ups were going to be and whatever. And I would choreograph it with Hubie, almost like a dance. And then he would do his thing for the wide shots, and then he'd come in and I'd come in and we'd get together and we'd work it out in the mediums or whatever. And it seemed to function in that manner, if that means anything. You know, you go to another stage and it's like rehearsing a dance. That's about it.
Mm-hmm. And Burt Ward's stuntman, Victor Paul,
Yes.
I think was like 40 with like a receding hairline.
Yes.
You could always tell they used him very sparingly because he didn't quite match Burt Ward very well
No.
in any shot. They used Burt a lot, I think.
Yes. Poor Bert. Really. Because you're right, Victor Paul didn't look like Bert.
No, he didn't.
But he could move like Bert. And Victor Paul, the late Victor, was great with fencing, swords, and all that stuff.
Right.
We learned how to fence. We had to.
In those fight scenes, again, as a kid, I believed them. I did.
yeah.
I believed that you could beat up the henchmen with a rope and tie them up all at once. I mean, why would you not? You know what I mean?
Yes.
You were so convincing for me
Well,
with
I was
that.
quick.
You were so earnest.
quick.
Yeah.
I was quick and earnest.
My cousin and I would put on the 45 of the Batman theme on this little phonograph. And then we would act out our fight scenes. And then we'd have to stop every 2 minutes and change to put the needle back at the beginning of the record again so the fight would continue. But we had to have that music behind us while we were doing it. Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for giving me a childhood that I still remember to this day. Influenced everything that I've ever done, any piece of media I ever created, even in as much as when we did Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and we had Blunt Man and Chronic, the Blunt Cave was the Bat Cave, including a reactor that was a bong reactor, but still an atomic reactor. You fed my imagination as an adult, and you filled my hours as a child. So I thank you so much for treating it so real, keeping it so fun, that you introduced me to a world that I never left, like 40 years later.
Well, Kevin, I want to thank you very much for your kind words, all of you, and for being my guest today here in Wayne Manor. You're really... Yes, Alfred. If you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have a little problem at the Wayne Foundation. Excuse me.
That's pretty cool.
Absolute legend,
What
man.
can you do?
A whole life you'll never get to eat with Batman. How much is it? I'm sure he meant to pay for it.
Oh, he'll be back, right? Yeah.
He invited us.
He's rich.
He didn't say anything about going Dutch, so I
No,
assumed
no,
it
no, no.
was all on him.
He's in the parking lot.
Is that his car?
Yep.
Why is he pulling out?